Happy Saturday and welcome back to our conversation inside a podcast series entitled Choosing to Live. This week we have together been on a journey about how we can choose to live with intentionality. And yesterday we talked about the importance of choosing to live, especially when we don't feel like it. And one of the things that's going to be important for us when we don't feel God's presence is to make choices that will continue to put us in the right position. Let me tell you why. Whenever you and I don't feel God's presence, we are extra sensitive. We are even more susceptible to temptation. The temptation is to want to forget about how we don't feel God's presence or how we feel when we don't feel God's presence, right? Flat or sad or heavy, right? There are an endless amount of temptations that will help us forget about that will help numb the feelings inside of us. And none of those things ever, provide what they promise, or none of those things ever make us feel better in the long run. The temptation, when we don't feel God's presence, is for us to choose things that will help us forget, or for us to slack off, you might say, with our spiritual exercises. The basic things, like going to Mass on the weekend, can encourage you enough to make sure that stays a healthy part of your rhythm in life. And there's a couple of encouragements there. Number one, whenever we go to Mass on the weekend, we're surrounded by a bunch of other people who are on the journey also. The temptation when you and I are struggling in the spiritual life is that we're the only ones struggling. And when we see other people at Mass, we're reminded that a lot of people are probably experiencing the same things that you and I are. The other blessing about being around other people is that it takes the attention off of us. I think one of the temptations that I find a lot of times when I'm not feeling God's presence is I become more, you might say, focused on me, focused on the flatness or the sadness that's there, focused on my, continued habits of giving into temptation when I'm not feeling God's presence. When I'm around people, it just takes the focus off of me. I'm kind of drawn out of me onto other people, and just the change in posture can do a lot for us. Of course, the advantage of going to Mass and keeping those spiritual exercises is that God is going to speak to us, even if we don't think He will. We're going to hear His word proclaimed. We're going to hear a homily, and sometimes God will speak to us in those settings that will actually give us a word of encouragement. And of course, even if we feel or don't feel Him in the Eucharist, that grace is in our life. What I'm trying to encourage us with this today is to resist the temptation to give up on our even most basic spiritual exercises, including going to Mass. So wherever you find yourself on the journey, let's make a recommitment or a commitment or continuing commitment to Mass on the weekends. And if you don't have a regular worshiping community, I want to invite you to join us at Christ Redeemer this weekend as we continue our series entitled, What Are the Odds? Talking about the things that prevent us from deepening our relationship with God. And until we see you at Mass or until we meet you again on the podcast series, God bless you.